Mr. Hodges. It's an honor to have you here. Maybe it took us a bit technical problems, but at the end, we could find each other here. We want to make a room today, especially about the US-Turkey relations, security-related relations between the two countries and the Ukraine crisis. And we are pleased to have you here, and we are listening, especially the Turkish audience, following you very closely with your detailed explanations about the situation, and we find you as a very close to Turkey friend. So me myself, I think we are not far from each other. You have served in Germany, so I'm in origin Turkish origin and German citizen. I have served in the Bundeswehr, working right now in Turkey in PR marketing. Gürkan is also Turkish origin German citizen, lives in Hamburg. He is a financial analyst, and Ilgun is software developer in Turkey. We are very interested in foreign policy related questions, and we try to give a different perspective about Turkish foreign policy. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the privilege. And again, I appreciate your persistence on helping us figure out how to make this work.
I think it's a Turkish culture. We don't give up so easily.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
So if you like to, maybe if you want to introduce yourself in short, we know you, of course, from the media and your explanations, analyses, but maybe you will give some insight about this.
Okay. Well, I was in the Army for about 40 years, and I think most of you know that I served in Izmir 2012 to 2014 when I was the commander of the NATO Land Command. So that was my really introduction to the Black Sea region. That's when I began to appreciate the whole region of Turkey up to Ukraine and from Romania to Georgia. And so after I retired from the Army, I went to work for a think tank, CEPA, Center for European Policy Analysis, which has traditionally focused on the Black Sea. That's what attracted me. So I, ever since then, the last 4 years, I have done everything I could to help draw attention to the Black Sea region, uh, why it matters for the United States, why it's so important that we think strategically long term about the security there, but also the economic development, the diplomatic relationships, and the importance of, to be honest with our look, the importance of repairing the relationship with our essential ally, Turkey.
Thank you very much. I think we can proceed with the questions. Of course, there are many questions also from our followers and the panelists. If there is anything where you wanted to pass, you can just say pass.
Okay.
Because most probably there will be also some political questions, so some of our guests are not comfortable to answer them. So it's our panel here, so no worries. So the first question, what came from our followers is, as you know, Turkey is one of the first members of NATO in 1952, with the increasing Soviet threat at that time, Turkey's desire and to firmly anchor itself in the Western Bloc. The Soviet threat perception of the USA and Europe, its unique position in the region, looking on one hand to the Balkans, on the other hand to the Caucasus, the protector of the Dardanelles and Bosphorus Straits, gateway to the Middle East and Europe, Asia, the deep military history of the country pushed both sides to work closely in an important crisis times. Of course, it's important here also to mention the heroic fight of the Turkish battalion in the Korean War alongside the Americans, and losing more than 700 of its soldiers and 2,000 plus wounded. By the way, my great uncle was also there in Korean War. Which today, sadly, is not much known in the West, as we see, and also in the US, when some people talk about phrases like Turkey is not our ally or is not an ally. In light of these realities, how do you see the Turkey-NATO history, the Turkish-American alliance, the benefits and importance until today with your experience?
So, I was in Istanbul just last week, actually. I was there for about 4 days with a small group. We were working on our Black Sea security project. We had been in Romania 2 weeks before that, and so Istanbul was the next stop. And really, very interesting conversations with several people from different universities, Kader Has and the Couture University, and also with the think tank like ADAM, Ambassador Ildem, who many of you will know, and also spoke to a couple of retired officers and some others and journalists. And it was important to be reminded of how. In fact, the reason we went there was to understand the Turkish perspective, and also for the credibility of our study, to be there to see the Bosphorus and to understand the importance of the geography. Ironically, when we went out into on a boat to go from the top to the bottom of the Bosphorus with our tour guide Yurik Ishik, who many of you may know of, the Bosphorus Watcher. Immediately we spotted the yacht of former President Medvedev. Had been down in the Mediterranean somewhere getting service, and it was moving north as fast as it could to get back to Sochi. Um, Look, I learned when I was in Izmir that uh, that Turkey had that NATO had a headquarters in Turkey since 1952, longer than any other NATO headquarters anywhere except Naples. So, as you correctly point out, there is a very long history. I cannot explain exactly why or where it went wrong. Of course, both sides could point to mistakes that the other has made. Usually, when I meet with my Turkish friends, we spend the first 15 minutes of them telling me of all the terrible sins of the United States, and then we can have the conversation. So um, I respect that, but of course, the relationship has to work both ways. Um, I think that the United States has, for sure, in the past, taken Turkey for granted, maybe from the Cold War days. Um, and there's probably some frustration, as you know, in our system, the way we organize. Central Command, the headquarters is responsible for the Middle East for U.S. Department of Defense, and then U.S. European Command is the headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany, that's responsible for all U.S. Department of Defense activities in Europe. Turkey, within our system, Turkey is inside U.S. European Command, but the boundary between U.S. European Command and U.S. Central Command happens to be the border between Turkey and Syria. So that means we've got two different headquarters that care about what's going on in Turkey, but for different reasons. Um, and I think this has caused us to think and make some decisions that make no sense to Turkey, and in the long run were mistakes. And I'm talking specifically the decision to give um, to provide weapons to the YPG for the fight against ISIS. This is what Central Command wanted because they're focused on the destruction of ISIS. UCOM, U.S. European Command, of course, would have had a different perspective. I certainly had a different perspective, but that was the decision was made. And I think this is so a bad tactical decision that damaged the relationship with a strategic ally for a tactical benefit against an enemy that is not an existential threat. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. I think also, and this would be the last thing I'd say. Most Americans, certainly in Washington D.C., the average member of Congress, the average person in the government, um, does not fully understand or appreciate the significance of the geography of the Black Sea and where Turkey sits. Turkey doesn't fit in EUCOM or CENTCOM alone. It's that connecting tissue, if you will, as you know, between Europe, the Middle East, Eurasia. It sits on top of that. And I remember a few years ago, I had a meeting with a senior officer from the Turkish General Staff, and I said, "Sir, good morning. How are you doing?" He said, "Ben, I wake up in the morning, I have Russia to the north, Iran, Iraq, Syria to the south, the Caucasus to the east, and the Balkans to the west. It's a hell of a neighborhood. And now that seems so obvious. When he said it, it was like, wow. Of course, Turkey looks at all the challenges on all its borders differently from how we look at Turkey, because where it sits on the map for us. So that's, I guess what I'm doing is I'm confessing to you. Of course, we've made mistakes in this relationship, and one of my goals is to encourage Turkey to work with other Black Sea nations to raise your voices together back in Washington and in Brussels to help build understanding of why the Black Sea is so important to all of us.
Thank you very much, General Hodges. A warm welcome from me as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us. General Hodges, do you think that if Turkey had intervened and said, okay, you know what, instead of giving those weapons to the PKK YPG, our Turkish army will take on the fight against ISIS, that Central Command would have reversed its decision to deliver weapons to the YPG PKK?
Well, you know, that is an argument. When I've discussed this with Americans who are in favor of providing these things, you know, the response would be, well, our Turkish allies are not doing anything. They're not being as aggressive, or they're not taking care of this. And so, you know, accurate or not, that certainly would have been a perception that if Turkey was not going to deal with ISIS, and as you know, I mean, there were reports, there was always speculation and rumors that somehow ISIS was being able to move through Turkey, that there was, whether it was money or people or whatever, and so I think there was skepticism from CENTCOM as well. So this really goes to, candidly, a lack of trust. And they could have several different reasons. That's got to be step one, is rebuilding the trust in each other. You know, yeah.
Has there been the request to Turkish officials to do so? So, well, to take up to be responsible for the alliance and take the fight against ISIS. So, has there been a formal request?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I don't know. I didn't serve in Central Command, so I don't know what the actual status is now of that. I don't know.
All right. Thank you
so.
so much.
I would hope
Thank
so.
you so much. Harun, would you continue, please?
Yes, thank you very much for the detailed insight. The question is, there is, the perception in Turkey, they make a parallel in the society when they talk about today's Turkey-US tensions, and make a parallel with the crisis in Cyprus in the 70s. Do you see there any parallels, or we are at a more burst stage right now with the Turkey-US relations?
When you say a parallel, you mean between the U.S. and Turkey now as compared to back during the Cyprus crisis?
Exactly, 74, yeah. And the following sanctions.
I think actually we're in a better place now. You know, we finally have an ambassador in there, Ambassador Flake, who brings a good reputation. I don't know how visible he's been inside Turkey yet, but he certainly came with a very good reputation as a statesman, and so I have high hopes for that. And I also think that there's a growing recognition that Turkey is doing more in the Black Sea region. I mean, the most obvious visible things you've done is Turkey refusing to recognize the annexation of Crimea. That's important. And I think most people that are expert, that pay attention to this, understand that President Erdogan has a relationship with President Putin as well as with President Zelensky, and still doesn't recognize the annexation of Crimea, providing, selling these excellent drones, as well as helping Ukraine develop its own capability. And then finally, a few weeks ago, under Article 19 of Montreux, closing the straits to Russian warships. These are significant steps. That's not lost on people that understand the situation. Now, of course, um, the well, let's be candid. There's a very loud Greek diaspora in the United States, as well as Armenian, that has a lot of influence inside the U.S. Congress, and so we can sit here and be angry about that or frustrated about it, or we can figure out how do we change that narrative. And I think it starts with, as I mentioned earlier, back in Washington D.C., putting your voices together with Romanians, Ukrainians, Georgians, um, explaining why the Black Sea region is so important, why Turkey is our essential ally in the region. Don't worry about these other lobby organizations or advocacy groups. They all have their own issues. I prefer to focus ahead. Look, as an example, almost everybody in Congress can correctly identify Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania on a map now, because those three countries put their voices together so loud and clear back in 2014. And that's why everybody in Congress rushed to support getting more capabilities there. That doesn't happen for the Black Sea countries. There is no cooperation that I see in Washington or Brussels. And so if you want to get the attention of the Congress and the attention of the White House and the Pentagon, you've got to get a lot louder and explain why the Black Sea matters.
Thank you. Many experts claimed that with the disintegration of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, NATO would also disintegrate, but that did not happen, and NATO repositioned itself against the growing threat of the terror. At that time, I remember the USA, the EU, and many of our Western allies put actually the PKK and its affiliated organizations on their terror lists. However, many Turkish military officials who served at that time or today are telling a different story, that it was actually only written on paper, but they couldn't get the real help from the material side and the political support from their allies. What do you think about that? Especially there is also a very often mentioned 2003, I remember the arrest of the Turkish special forces in northern Iraq from American forces. So what do you think about that?
Well, I'm a little bit familiar. At least I heard the story about the Turkish special forces that were detained. That was obviously the more and more you look at it, what a colossal mistake that was. However, there's always two or three other sides to every story, so that this is not a case of where our Turkish allies were without any mistake or without sin here. So I think what we've got to do is stop focusing so much on every time Turkey is offended, and then for 20 years we keep bringing it out and point to, this is why the relationship is messed up. There is I think again it's the United States. What people will remember is that in 2003, before that incident happened, is that the United States was not allowed to bring troops through Turkey to attack into northern Iraq. Now, shame on us. I was a colonel at the time. I was a brigade commander in the 1st Brigade of the 101st during the initial invasion. And of course, we attacked from Kuwait up into Turkey. But another one of our divisions was supposed to go through Turkey down to attack Iraq from the north. I don't know what planning or coordination was done. I'm sure that the ships didn't just show up, but to be denied the ability to do that by the Turkish parliament, which of course that's the prerogative of Turkey. But I think a lot of people remember that. Here we are at the point of an invasion, and our ally would not allow us to do that. And again, I was a colonel. I was focused on my own brigade, but what I'm saying is these are the kind of things that contribute to misunderstandings, loss of trust, and yeah, it's hard stuff. And so what we need is senior people, cooler-headed people to think strategically. Not when you're talking strategy, you can't have emotion. It can only be about interests and the map, the geography, and that's where my head is. Not what happened 20 years ago. You know, I don't even talk about why did Turkey buy S-400s? When I hear the story, well, it's because the U.S. would not sell Patriot. That's absolutely not true. I was in Turkey at the time. Of course, we would want to sell Patriot, but what we were not willing to do is provide all the um, proprietary property. I mean, that's a normal thing. We didn't give that to Germany or the Netherlands or anybody else that has Patriot. So when I hear my Turkish allies say we had no choice but to buy S-400 because the U.S. would not sell Patriot, that's absolutely not true. But I don't lay awake at night thinking about what a terrible decision that was by Turkey. I think it's very unfortunate that Turkey is not part of the F-35 program. I hope that changes at some point, and I hope that my government will go ahead and deliver these F-16s. Let's get that done. That's an easy yes. So I hope the administration will do that. But that requires us. We've got to think strategically. Turkey did not help herself when the president of the Turkish Republic is in Washington D.C. and his security detail is kicking the shit out of protesters. Now, probably, in fact, I don't doubt it. That was a setup. Those protesters knew that they would probably be pounded, but it was to create a scene like that. But still, that happened in Washington D.C. I think you can understand why people are frustrated. So I think there's enough sins on both sides. Let's focus on the future. And I was very encouraged when I was in Istanbul last week to see several different positive things. And you could just there was a sense that Turkey was feeling more and more confident about taking on some responsibilities. When I hear my Turkish friends say regional ownership, I said, okay, good. Well, then own it. That means you've got to do stuff. You have to, if you're going to talk about regional ownership, then what does that actually mean? That means ensuring freedom of navigation in the Black Sea. That means holding Russia accountable when it violates international law. These are the kind of things that I think regional ownership means.
I agree on the part of the story of the Patriot batteries, actually. I remember the tenders very well. But just a follow-up questions on that. Don't you mean that especially the year of 2015 accelerated this issue with the problems of YPG, but also the downing of the Russian jet and the mixed feelings to that time coming out of the US administration? I remember the speech on that day. I guess Obama was speaking with French President Hollande. And it was a speech like, yes, every country has its right to defend, but something like they should figure it out before it escalates. So this sign, actually, I think, made also the administration and the society here a bit anxious about how much we will be protected when there is really the Armageddon Day standing against the Russians.
Yeah.
Maybe that has affected too the decisions with S-400 Patriot crisis with the US.
Could be, but that is a great point that you brought up, Harun. The the Obama administration, and look, I'm no Trump supporter, but the Obama administration had a reputation for being easy on Russia, for discounting Russia, for not taking them serious, or for worrying about escalation. You remember reset? There were so many mistakes made. Nothing happened after Russia invaded Crimea. Nothing happened after Syria jumped over President Obama's red line. And so I think it would have been a mistake. It was a mistake for the president to be critical of our ally defending its airspace. I was so impressed that Turkey shot down that Russian aircraft. I was very impressed. And it was interesting that other than some economic sanctions that happened right away, they're really the fallout in the great scheme of things, was minor. And so when I hear people talk about, oh, we've got to be careful in Ukraine, we might provoke the Russians, nonsense. The Russians, they threaten things all the time, but at the end of the day, they only respect strength. And that's what happened. Turkey shot it down. And so it would have been a mistake. But that period of time, you're right, there was a lot of things going on with Syria, with refugees, with Russia's invasion, um, the uh, the attempted coup, all of these things happening within this 1 or 2 years, and and dealing with ISIS. So I think there's no other way to say it. We made mistakes.
Thank you. Gürkan, you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, we're getting to a point as now let me phrase it differently. So as you've rightly pointed out, we in Turkey do think that our American ally does not understand us 100%. As you've pointed out, how your Turkish counterpart said to you, having these neighbors like the Balkans, like the Caucasus, or the Middle East. So, see, from our perspective, it's like this. We try to create something in our area. So, to our south, we do have authoritarian regimes, yes. But at the same time, we do have the soft power, and we proved this time and time again, especially in the 2000s, that we can soften the approach of these authoritarian regimes towards their people by cooperation. So, what went wrong in Syria? Iran, our major adversary, the US's major adversary, as well as Turkey's major adversary, planted this seed and how shall I say, started this civil war. Our prime minister, after the process started in Daraa and Damascus, our prime minister visited Syria and he said, you know what, please don't shoot at them. We'll educate a police force which can use non-lethal weapons in order to calm down rioters. You know what happened? The exact opposite. Warships bombarded Syrian cities. Syrian warships bombarded Syrian cities, and the war escalated. We didn't have any other choice than cutting the ties with the Ba'ath Party and Bashar al-Assad. That was our only choice. So now we feel, so our point is we were on the brink of creating a Middle Eastern European Union. And now we feel left alone by our American allies who only focus, this is our view, who only focus on their security issues. Say, hey, this is threatening, ISIS is threatening the security of Israel and it is threatening the security of the United States. Yes, it does. Hey, it is threatening the global economy by threatening energy supplies. Yes, it is. But you know what? The Syrian civil war destroyed something that we wanted to create because we have to feed 85 million people. Never forget that. We have to create wealth. So we're at a different point than the United States is, or Germany or France is, or our United Kingdom is. So, and we feel that our US allies, as well as our European allies, do not emphasize enough with us and do not understand this. So it is a fatal decision when the United States supports an affiliated group to the PKK. That, of course, is, how shall I say, this is a big contribution to misunderstanding each other. So my question is, don't you think that there is a lack of empathy not only from the Turkish side, but also from the United States. I do feel at the same time, yes, that our government has not done enough to repair the relations. But I do also feel that we are right when we are saying we want to create something, we want to create wealth, and from the US, the only thing that comes is we care about our security and about the energy supply.
Hmm. Okay, I feel a little bit like a student in a university class here. You guys have, I mean, you're bringing up some excellent points and pieces of recent history with which I'm not as familiar as you are. Um, all I can say is that my effort is focused on repairing that relationship, um, trying to build understanding inside the administration on why it's important that we have a Black Sea strategy that includes Turkey as our essential ally, that we work with this empathy that you're talking about, understanding the Turkish perspective, the strategic interests of Turkey, its geography. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm with you. I can't explain every decision that the U.S. government has made. But well, let me ask this: who does Turkey work with closely in the Black Sea region back in Washington D.C.? I mean, what does Turkey do in Washington to try and explain all that?
So, and this is where I say you are right, you're absolutely right, that my government does not take the appropriate steps in order to establish a working relations. Because if we really look at where Turkey stands and where America is, we do not really have any we do absolutely have overlapping strategic interest. So there is nothing that we cannot solve. And I personally, I do miss this point in the public conversation in Turkey, that nobody really says, "Hey, these guys are from thousands of miles away. They do not wish us any harm. They wish us good. We just have to explain others." This is what I miss in the public discussion in Turkey. So
Hmm.
we have to focus on ourselves as well. It's not a one-way road, is it?
Right, right. That's true. And I do think that strategic relationships cannot be based on personalities, because no matter what, these personalities will always change. You know, our election cycle, your election cycle. Um, so it's got to be based on what are the shared common understanding of interests as well as the importance of the geography. Yeah, I'd love to hear that conversation between our leaders, the way you just described it, Gorgon. Um, but I think that would be very helpful. Who else? I mean, who else in Europe? Is it UK or is it France? Who? Of course, you know, I live in Frankfurt, so I know that there is a very large Turkish diaspora that lives in Germany. And here, Harun, of course, a former member of the Bundeswehr. But who else in Europe is what would we say, Turkey versteher that understands and gets it? That could be an interlocutor, if you will, to the United States.
I mean, of course, and this will be my last statement to this topic. I think we do have a lot of friends, such as you, who are willing to listen. But I mean, there is the person who's willing to listen, so we have to present something. That's very easy. So we have to present our perspective to the people who are willing to listen. Thank you very much for listening. And I think we have to put this not only on the government level, but also on the level of the civil society. We do have to present ourselves to our friends who are willing to listen and tell them what our strategic goals are. not only in the field of security, but also in the field of economics and economic partnership, investment. See, I'm a banking guy, consulting guy, so that's always what I'm thinking about, how to create wealth. But yeah, enough on that. If you don't want to add something, of course you have the last word, General Hodges.
No, I don't think I could say it any better than you have, and I appreciate that.
All right, then.
Dan Gürkan, if you allow me, I will move a bit away from the Middle East because one side of ours is looking also to Europe. So let's talk a bit about Europe. Mr. Hodges, my question would be here. As you know, with the Ankara Agreement signed between Turkey and the EU in 1963, the way for Turkey actually to become a member of the European Union was technically opened. And I remember in a speech with the former German ambassador, he was talking about that, especially during the 90s, that the American President Bill Clinton, who is actually known in Turkey as the last Turkey-friendly president, I don't know why, but that is the perception in the society, that he has pressured a lot to that time to the European countries that Turkey is firmly integrated into Europe. And the last step would be, of course, the European Union membership. Don't you think this is something that Turkey, after so many years, deserves? And especially considering the rising threats that NATO is facing today, with the rising, again, aggressive Russia, wouldn't be a symbol, finally, to firmly integrate Turkey inside of Europe with the European Union membership, especially also when we look to the conversations about the membership of Ukraine. And we are not comparable, I think, with Ukraine. We are standing at the doors for already over 60 years. What do you mean about that?
Well, I would love to see Turkey join the European Union, but I say that as an American that happens to live in Germany. I don't know all the legitimate arguments or concerns or reasons versus other prejudices or reluctance. I think Turkey would be a contributor versus a consumer, without a doubt, in so many different ways. I've always thought that a critical part of improving security in the Black Sea region was through increased economic development and investment. So, for example, to get Georgia as the portal between Europe and Eurasia, to have that's this Georgia-Azerbaijan connection, that would do so much for you get European companies wanting to set up logistics hubs there. That would get commerce going across the Black Sea, towards Romania, up the Danube, towards Turkey. I mean, there's so many good things that would come from this economic investment. The EU would benefit from it because that would improve the need or the requirement to improve infrastructure in Romania, for example, on the Danube, as well as highways and railways. So there'd be so many benefits to it if we were thinking strategically about economic investment in the region. I think Turkey plays a role there. I think Turkey could also, as we think about what's going to happen in Ukraine here over the next few years, whether it's called the Second Marshall Plan or the whatever it's going to be called to rebuild Ukraine, it's going to cost hundreds of billions of euro, and so Turkey, I think, could play a role bringing in Qatar, for example, with money, with new energy resources, finding ways to help shoulder the burden with the EU that could begin to build some mutual respect and recognition of the value of this kind of interaction.
Thank you very much. Now more about defense relations between Turkey and US, especially a recent history about the order of the F-16s. You are probably aware that the campaign called for a very long time on social media. This no jets for Turkey has been going on. And of course, you have mentioned before in a different matter about diaspora groups also living in the US that is also connected to some lobbies and with the Congress. So in your opinion, if Turkey, a NATO ally that cannot get the F-35s it has already paid for, could not get the F-16s, how will the southern flank of NATO be protected? Do you think if there is a no coming out of Congress, I hope not, that would be actually the lowest point of our relations, and how a NATO southern flank should protect, especially in the increasing danger coming from Russia right now?
Yeah. Well, I think, if I'm asked by any administration official what should be done, step one, let's go ahead and complete this F-16 deal. I mean, that should not be a big challenge, and I hope that the administration will press Senator Menendez, who's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, to say, "Come on, let's get this done. There's other things that we need to be working on, and we need to rebuild this relationship with our essential ally Turkey for the reasons you just specified." So that's I'm with you on the importance of doing that. But again, this goes back to there's a burden on Turkey. Yes, we have to think more strategically. We have to be a little we have to do better at that. But Turkey's got to do a better job of selling itself, of explaining why this matters. And again, it's never going to happen by yourself. This is a small example, but I thought it was illustrative. Back about 2 years ago, right before COVID, we at SEPA, our think tank, organized a salon, a Black Sea salon, and the Romanian embassy hosted it. And we had invited all the nations of the Black Sea region to come to it, and invite the ambassadors to come there and to speak, to talk about why the Black Sea region matters, because we were really trying hard to build some momentum to elevate the noise of why this region matters. Of course, where the Romanian embassy is located, right in Washington. It's directly across the street from the Turkish embassy. We had every ambassador there except Turkey. We did not get anybody from the Turkish embassy to come to it, not even a driver. I mean, everybody was too busy. They chose not to participate in this gathering that had all the other ambassadors. Well, I mean, what are people supposed to, and this was not a big Turkish holiday where everybody was gone. I mean, it was a deliberate decision to stay away. And there's no bigger friend of, or there's not too many bigger friends of Turkey than SEPA, our little think tank. So in Washington, D.C. So I think Turkey has a responsibility to figure out, how do you get the ear of the U.S. Congress, the way some of your neighbors have done, to explain why this matters.
So as I have understood, we need also on our side to give more efforts and find the right connections, especially the Turkey-friendly people who are involved in that, to accelerate this process, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of members of Congress that are actually very good strategic thinkers. I mean, Senator Graham from South Carolina, and he does it because he thinks strategically, not because there's a large Turkish population in Charleston, South Carolina. He thinks strategically. So, figuring out who these guys are. Congressman Mike Turner, one of the senior Republicans in the House, that is he's the most experienced NATO guy in the whole House of Representatives. So, I mean, there are members out there that think strategically, not just because of who's in their district or in their state. That's who needs to help understand and be an advocate.
I agree, but when I think that you mentioned about Mr. Graham, he was frequently in Turkey, but then we remember also his speech after the Syria intervention. That was one of the harshest speeches that we have ever heard. But yeah, I understand there is also politics behind.
Right.
I want to talk about our lovely neighbors. I hope that we can solve all our problems in diplomatic way and move on. But the question here, especially what is spoken very often in Turkey, is maybe you heard about that. The issue about the American bases in Greece. There is this perception, and some experts or ex-soldiers are talking about that the US is, because of their anger against Turkey, increasing their presence, especially with the base in Alexandropoli. And sometimes it also falls a bit into conspiracy theory, etc., that we are encircled from our allies. What do you think about that idea? Or is there really an increasing of these bases, or it is just routine, or is it really against Russia? What is going on there? What is your opinion and knowledge?
Okay. And after this, I have to go. I've got a BBC thing coming up in just a few minutes.
Definitely. I
Okay.
don't want to hold you long.
That's okay. Now, this has been a very interesting conversation for me. I have learned a lot from it, and I appreciate it. But there's about three things that are completely wrong with the situation. I'm not saying you advocate for it, but that you laid out. First of all, Turkey is encircled by Russia. Okay, I know this famous no problems with neighbors, and we maintain status quo in the Black Sea and regional ownership. Well, that approach by Turkey has you now basically surrounded by Russia. They've got their navy bases and air bases in Syria. They are in Nagorno-Karabakh as so-called peacekeepers. They're in Armenia, and of course now they've occupied Crimea, and they're quite active in Serbia. So you've got Russians all around you, and they have zero respect for Turkish Navy. They sail around in the Black Sea wherever they want. So that's who you're encircled by. And Turkey, I remember talking to a Turkish admiral recently, retired admiral, and I said, how would Turkey do against the Russian Navy? He said, we would crush them. Okay, well, what are you waiting for? I mean, you can't talk about regional ownership and then stand by while the Russian Navy violates international law every day of the week. Now, set that aside. The reason we have a base in Alexandropoli, this started back when I was the commander of U.S. Army Europe, and we were looking for as many places as possible to be able to bring equipment in, because we were trying to present to the Russians to demonstrate for deterrence all of our capabilities. I remember bringing a team to visit the port there at Izmir also to look at where would we bring ammunition, how could we bring ashore heavy equipment, and we did this all around Greece, Italy, Slovenia, as well as Germany, Poland, Baltic ports, obviously the Netherlands, and even in France and Germany. So we were constantly looking for places. Alexandropoli was the third choice. Obviously, Piraeus port, controlled by the Chinese. Thessaloniki, controlled by a Greek Russian. So neither of those could be our principal ports. And so Alexandropoli was the next choice. And we even paid, the U.S. Army paid to have an old sunken freighter pulled out of there to open it up so that we could then bring in ships that could unload equipment. So this was us in search of multiple redundant seaports where we could be able to project power if we had to into the Black Sea region against Russia. That's what that's for. And then of course our ambassador there, very energetic, figured out that if the Greeks would be willing to set up an LNG terminal there. So that's happening, and you can then it's another way to get energy up into Europe. This has nothing to do with us being unhappy with Turkey or angry at Turkey. This is about, here's an opportunity to improve infrastructure and improve our flexibility. By the way, I don't hear Turkey asking, "Hey, U.S., come over here, build another base," or there's more stuff you can do here. We have a very important air base inside a Turkish base, obviously at Incirlik. Incirlik is a Turkish air base. The U.S. is a tenant, if you will, inside the Turkish perimeters, Turkish controlled That's an extremely important base for us. You know, of course, that we have an important radar there in Malatya. That radar sits with its American crew inside a Turkish perimeter. And then, of course, the NATO headquarters at Izmir. Again, it's a Turkish installation with a NATO headquarters inside of it. All I'm saying is that we would not go to all this work in Alexandropoli to do something because we were unhappy with Turkey. I mean, I get it. I know conspiracy theories are the number two sport in Turkey after football.
That's true.
Okay, but that's not that you're giving us too much credit for devious thinking to think that we would do that.
Actually, that is the reason why we are doing this panel, because I find it very important to build down all of this misinformation actually going on both sides. That's why I think it's very important to inform the people with the right information and knowledge.
Right. Well, thanks for giving me an opportunity there. I'm not the expert on these things, but you know, I love Turkey. I love Turkish culture. I hated leaving the other day when I after 4 days being back in Turkey, I hated leaving. But I think that the in a way this terrible crisis in Ukraine has now everybody in the Congress knows where the Black Sea is, you know, and we're reminded like, oh, this is important here. We need to think strategically. Ukraine is not an island. It's important because of where it sits on the map. And so Turkey has a chance to really make the case. If Turkey's thinking strategically, make the case. Well, look, this is why we're so important. We helped. We blocked. There's no more Russian ships coming up the straits right now, which means that Ukraine can continue to sink these terrible Russian ships and take the pressure off of the poor people that live in these cities that are getting hammered by Russian Navy missiles. Turkey's doing something there. You know, make sure more people know about it.
Well, thank you so much, General Hodges. To be honest, I've never thought of your explanation of the Alexandropoli base. Very much appreciated that you have made clear what the American standpoint is, and now I can really emphasize why this is happening. And to be honest, I mean, yes, I always knew that Turkey was encircled by Russia, but of course my perception has changed towards the security activities of the United States there. So thank you very much. It's very much appreciated, sir.
Thank you.
Harun, do you want to say the last words, or shall I close?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Hodges, for joining us. We have learned a lot, and I hope maybe in future we can speak about recent situations again on another panel. Thank you for everyone joining. It was a really fruitful conversation, and I wish you all a good evening or which time zone you are. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. Jambon.
Jimbon, yes.
That last was not good. Fenerbahçe.
Beşiktaş.
Oh no. All right.
Thank you very much.
Trabzonspor.
Well, thank you so much for everyone who has participated in this panel, especially to General Ben Hodges, retired Army General, former commander of the NATO forces in the European Command. I am your host, Gürkan, and I wish you all a pleasant evening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.